Hello, guys, and welcome back to D6 Evolution. I'm Lewis. I'm here with Dom. Say hello, Dom.
Hi everyone.
So, welcome to our new series. This is called Let's Talk Warhammer. And basically, what we're going to talk about is a little bit more on a competitive slant, but we're going to talk about meta, we're going to talk about tournament prep that we're doing, and we're going to be talking about interesting lists that we've seen out and about in the wide world of Warhammer. How are you feeling about it, Dom?
I'm excited for it. I'm excited to talk about this new show, kind of like get involved with the D6 community and just talk what's happening in the meta because we need to know.
Absolutely. Indeed. Now, we're going to do a slightly different slant to this than you'll see in quite a lot of competitive chats. Yes, we're interested at the top. Yes, we're interested in what's winning, but you get that content a lot. We're going to try and focus a little bit of a slant more to sort of the mid-tables and people looking to work their way up. So if you are a serial 2 and 3 player, 3 and 2 player, and you're wanting to go to 4 and 1, or maybe even that magic 5 and 0, hopefully our kind of meta chat here is going to fill you in a little bit more. You're going to hear about what most likely you're going to face, because you're not going to face sisters in every round if you're going 2 and 3. And unfortunately, you're not going to get to go 4 and 1 or 5 and 0 unless you can beat the people that are currently playing at your level and become better than them. So, like always at D6, we're hoping to increase your playing ability and really focus on getting you up there, and then eventually you will be able to make the tables. So we're going to talk top tables. We're going to talk a little bit about about the top of the tier of the meta, but we're going to try and spread the wings a bit and talk about really every play, every round in the tournament that you may play. So we are breaking these series down into 3 sections for each video. The first section we're going to call Retrieve Octarius Data.
Ooh, I like
this
that.
is you like that one? You can see where this is going, can't you? And that is going to be about our meta talk section. So we're going to talk about the general meta. Then we're going to talk about the second section, which is called Warp Ritual, and that is about the tournament prep that we've done and what we're readying and how we're getting ready for the next tournament, whatever that may be. Currently, we're in LGT season, so obviously we're going to have a bit of a slant on that. We may even do a special episode on LGT. And then finally, we've got a section called Raise the Banners. And Raise the Banners is going to be talking about an interesting list we've seen out in the world. Maybe someone we've played against, maybe something we've been thinking about. And really the idea here is just to get the juices flowing, hear about some interesting stuff, not just everything that's winning the top tier, but stuff that is out there and doing well, or we thought it was interesting, had a slant to it, that maybe you incorporate parts of all into your own list and make you better at list development yourself.
Yeah.
So without further ado, what do you reckon, Dom? Should we get started?
Yeah, let's get started. And I have a cool idea to start with. So I know it's been all over the internet pretty much for the last couple of weeks because it's kind of shocked everyone as soon as this Orc Codex came out. Lo and behold, Manny came out with a fantastic idea of almost like a wacky races sort of list.
Manny Cheesema.
Yeah, Manny Cheesema. So Lewis, you want to tell us a little bit about that first, and we'll just kind of give our thoughts on how we think we could approach it if it turned up across the table from us.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is talking about the top tier. We do not expect that you're going to see this for every table all your way through, but it's interesting because you never know, you might get drawn against Manny or one of his acolytes in round 1 playing this kind of list. After that, I think it's probably going to start shooting up through the tables, so you'll become less and less likely to see it. But you know what? You still want to have a game into it. Now, this is, for the people that don't know, it's roughly around 18 buggies. You tend to have 3 units of 3, so 9 of each type of buggy. There's the no line of shoot buggies, the scrap jets, rocket truck scrap jets.
Yeah, the rocket truck squig buggies. Yeah,
that's what it's called.
Ones.
Yeah, sorry, the squig buggies. Yeah, quite right. And then so it's probably 3 units of 3 of that, and then 3 units of 3 of the other ones, the rocket buggies, the ones that shoot
the mega truck scrap jets.
That's the one. I do not remember the names. You won't either, so don't worry. Just make sure you know the difference between the two and what they do. Don't need to remember the names.
No.
So the thing about this list is, it's absolutely off the wall in terms of a style. I really like it. Definitely something to think about. Manny always finds what he thinks is good and takes as many of them as he possibly can. He actually won LGT the year before, I believe, 2 years ago before COVID, playing all flyers. I think he's I can't remember, 7 flyers or something ridiculous. So he's very accustomed to this. So you will probably. You'll see it about the tournament. I would imagine there's probably going to be at least 3 or 4 players bringing this list, if not a few more, because it's fairly easy to put together. If you can buy the models and money's no object, and it just does a crap ton of damage straight out the gates. Now, things to watch out for is it can fall back and shoot. So you think that you can wrap it, but you probably can't. It's actually decent in combat. So
really decent in combat.
Yeah. So if you think you're going to wrap it with just like a 5-man squad of intercessors or something like that, you are not. It is going to kill you. And the other thing as well is it's the ramshackle rule, which if it didn't have the ramshackle rule, I think a lot of this list falls down. But if you think that the ramshackle rule means that, and this is for all orc vehicles, and if you don't know the new orc codex, this is definitely something to watch out for, because you do have a good chance of playing orcs at some point at a larger tournament, is that any weapons that are not strength 8 or are below strength 8, so strength 7 or below, it reduces the damage by 1. And that is absolutely massive. If you think you're shooting at it with an autocannon that's strength 7 AP2, nope, that's strength 7 AP1 damage 2. Nope, that's strength 7 AP1 1 damage. And that's just halving your damage. It's just halving your damage. It's pretty strong. I think you've got to be wary of it. Dom, have you got any initial thoughts of how you would approach playing that list?
Yeah, so because the main problem with it is that they're very undercosted, which is why he's spamming them, because I think they're just under 100 points per rocket truck, squig, buggy, and then they have loads of shots. It's like 3d6 in total, strength 5, -2, 2 damage, blast shots, and they're actually really tough as well. They've got loads of wounds, and then they're toughness 6. So they're actually no joke. You're not just going to shoot a las cannon or a dark lance and just pick them up. You've really got to commit quite a lot. And with orcs, like, they have the custom force fields, which can negate damage. So yes, they've only got a 4-up save. Yeah, but now, like, they're going to get an invuln, which is quite annoying, because it kind of skews the math when you're thinking about what can go into it. And on top of that, they've got the ramshackle rule, which is so durable for them. So the way I think I would play is I would attempt to rush and move block them, because they have a massive footprint. And I think the way you could try and handle it, yes, you get to do fall back, they can fall back and all of that, but for being a Jakaro player, witches can wrap and trap people, and if you get enough units in there that they don't all die from just being cut by the buzzsaws that are on the on the trucks, then you might get away, because the weapons are blast. You might get away with like keeping them in combat for like a duration of time, or even if, like myself, I love a raider rush. Black Heart, advance and charge them first turn and just tag them all. And because they've got such a big footprint at the back, you might actually have enough of a rush to keep them in their deployment zone for a turn.
I would just comment on that. I would. It is the way to play, but I think if you haven't had a practice into them, and I personally haven't, so I can't speak from experience, but I can just see that, especially with raiders, not working out like you think, because once you get in there, I think they're like 2 or 3 damage in combat with the buzzsaws. All they need to do is pick up one raider, everything's going to fall back. You've got to be able to block the entire army in its deployment zone, and furthermore, you're also going to be likely to be playing against commandos. They're going to push out turn 1, so you can't like come in from deep strike and charge. That's kind of, that strat's out the window. So it's really, really hard to do that. It is a strategy, don't get me wrong, but just when you're playing that strategy, you've got to think, am I going to be able to get all of it? What happens if this raider dies? I think your comment about witches is way better, because if you play 20 witches, how many attacks they got? I don't know. It's like probably like 4, 5, 6, and maybe
a lot.
3.
Yeah.
But you've got 4 up and vulnerable. So even if they get 15, 20 attacks, you can still have 7 or 8 witches left, and those witches are going to hold them in that deployment zone. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know if the raiders are a good idea, but definitely the witches are a really good idea. But it's a hard matchup, man, and it's one let's be honest, it's one you're probably going to lose unless you've scrimmed against it and you've figured a strategy because you played it and you've gone, right, well, that didn't work, and then this does work. I think it will beat you, and I think you probably got to accept at this stage that that's likely to be the outcome. If you really think that you're going to play them and you really want to beat them, we've got one piece of advice for you: go play someone that's got that. Play them 2 or 3 times and work out what your strategy is, because I think that list will beat everyone the first time until someone develops what the strategy is, or maybe starts teching against it. So well, let's move on from the orcs now. So everyone kind of knows the top tier at the moment. You've got the absolutely broken as AdMech, which I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous. I just cannot understand how the rules writers could let all that stuff go through, but they have, and it's in existence, and we've got to play against it. Now, when you go for that 4-1, I would imagine that your loss is going to be against AdMech, maybe Drukhari. But it's if you play against AdMech, that's probably going to be lost in the tournament. But at the same time, if you scrim against them, if you practice them against enough, and if you tech for them, they are beatable. I've managed to beat the Lucius Mars a couple of times with a Chaos list, and was one I'm going to talk about later. So it's not completely impossible. But it is a hard game, and you've got to be ready for it, and you've got to be teched for it. What else were you seeing at the top of the meta, Dom? One you might know?
top of the meta is obviously my favorite, Drukhari. And the typical sort of list you see at the moment is the Raider Rush, because it is so points efficient. You've got cheap units of witches and Kabalites and Incubi and these characters which are 60 points, 140 points that can just pick up whatever they want. And they're all tooled up for different things. So a good kind of counter for them is actually like a weird one that a lot of Marines seem to bring on their list at the moment, is Volkites.
I wonder why they're bringing them.
Because they can pick up raiders very easily, and the whole reason which makes the Raider Rush so effective is just because there's so many raiders flying at you, and inside, once you kill the stuff inside, once you kill the raiders, out drops all of the obsec bodies, which are going to fall on your points. And then the following turn, they're in combat with you, because that's what they want to do. They want to rush you, be in combat. And then our vehicles are Dark Lancers, which are anti-tank weapons, which and are very efficient at what they do as well, especially with the Black Heart reroll or Obsidian Rose reroll. So that's kind of the top of like Drukhari play at the moment. But because of LGT, which we'll go into later, there's starting to be a shift, which I've already seen in the Drukhari play.
Well, we'll come into that when we talk about tournament prep, because I am interested to kind of explore that with you. I think the last one to mention at the top tier is obviously Sisters. I say that with a little bit of a reticence, because I actually personally haven't played Sisters in a tournament yet. I know that's just a roll of the dice, and I'm sure I'll play them, and I'm quite likely to play them at LGT, I'd imagine. But I just don't think there's that many Sisters players around that I've experienced, and maybe just the tournaments I've been going to. But I see Drukhari everywhere. I'm always seeing a couple of AdMech. I'm expecting to see a chunk of Orcs. There'll be one or two Sisters players, and sometimes I just miss them and we don't play each other. So I don't think that's that much of a deal. But I think what's important to talk about here, and you touched on it when you mentioned about the Raiders, is if you look at this top tier meta, you're talking about AdMech, Drukhari, Sisters. Those are T3 bodies that span the board. They are susceptible, therefore, to strength 6, and particularly in the case with the chickens, but the Raiders from Drukhari, but also the chickens. Your strength 6 2 damage weapons can be really strong there. The 2 damage gets around the +1 save that I think it's Lucius gets. So strength 6, 2 damage weapons, maybe with a bit of AP. Anything around that kind of profile is super, super good right now. It really is. That is, if you want to go from 3-2 to 4-1, or from 4-1 to 5-0 in a 2-day tournament, you've got to be pumping those weapons, because if you've got to beat one of those lists at some point to take that, because otherwise you'll play Drukhari and you just won't win. I would say that out of the 3 of Orcs, AdMech, let's see, Orcs, AdMech, and Sisters and Drukhari, I think that you are always going to have a difficult game to AdMech, and unless you really have a solid game plan that you played enough into, I think you're going to lose. I think the Orcs are too new now for me to comment much on. I think a list like Manny's Buggy's list is, you've probably got to expect to lose that as well. But I think on the bright side, I think that Drukhari and Sisters, but particularly Drukhari, I think that is a list, a matchup you can win. And if that is the difference between you going 3-2 or 4-1, that's probably the one to focus on. They're the most prevalent in the meta. They're very easy to understand the damage profile that you need, strength 6, strength 7. I wrote a list to try and beat Dom. I'll be straight up. He was playing Drukhari. He was like a 27-0 win streak.
That was a bit ridiculous.
And that includes, 4 tournaments as well, like that you
12-0 at tournaments.
12-0 at tournaments. Obviously podiuming at every single one. And I was just fed up of losing to him. So I was playing my chaos, and I said, you know what, I've just got to beat a list. I've just got to make a list that beats Drukhari. And I was playing Emperor's Children, and I pummeled out the auto cannons. I had 2 Leviathan Dreadnoughts with storm cannons. I had 2 squads of Havocs with auto cannons, Noise Marines coming in, pods, and I just went boom, and I finally managed to beat him because I just had the right profile and I just picked up everything on the board, and all of a sudden, it wasn't a game. That probably isn't a very good listen to a lot of other things. I took that tournament to do very well with it, but against the Drakari, yeah, it's great, man. And so you got to think that you got to start taking some of that into your army. So let's talk about the next thing then. So if we want to beat the top tier lists, we've got to be playing, your strength 6, 2 damage. We think about Admech Sisters, Drakari. But that isn't what you play most of the time, right? That is probably one of your 5 games for most people will be against one of those lists, maybe 2 if you're unlucky.
Yeah.
What are the things that you are seeing the most prevalent at the mid tables or on your way up to the 4-1, 5-0 victory? What are you playing the most, Dom, at the moment?
So the most I've been playing, I've noticed a lot that in every single tournament I went to so far, there's been 3 to 4 night players at each event.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's because they're models that people love to collect, especially with lockdown. Like, people have had time to paint their knights and really get like a collection going. But it's funny though, because you got like Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, and then also like Chaos teching in with bringing like Armigers and all this sort of stuff. You're seeing a different type of weaponry that you need to kind of deal with those mid-table armies, because you don't need the flat 2 damage and strength 6 now. You're needing like the strength 8, D6 damage, or D3+3, or melters. And it's a difficult one, because like when like as a Drakari player, when I'm playing these sorts of mid-tier lists, I'm already prepared for them, because I've got spattering of Dark Lancers everywhere. All of my like witches and incubi are way too efficient to kind of for the mid-table armies to kind of deal with them. Like 10 witches will pick up like a massive blob of 20 warriors like in a heartbeat. And it's a very funny sort of scenario at the moment, because the mid tables, like they just don't really have the tools at the moment to deal with the top tier lists, but the mid tables are the ones you're going to play more than the top tier lists.
Even if you're a top player, even if you are going 5-0 or 3-0, for Snar TT, you still have to play the majority of your games on the mid tables. That's just how it works, right? Now, you might, if you win your first game, you play against somebody who wins their first game. So maybe certainly after round 2, like round 3, 4, 5, you are going to be playing the topper tier lists. But even if you don't do so well, like you could have a win, but a low score. And I know they're talking about changing the pairings, but currently it still exists that it is still most likely that you'll be playing Deathwing, Knights, Death Guard, Custodes, Marine Dreadnought lists are all over the place. Well, not even Marine Dreadnought list, but a Marine list with 3 Redemptors in it. It's just like absolute bog standard, whether it's Blood Angels, Salamanders, Death Watch, like Ultramarines. Like, these are what you are going to play most of your rounds and tournaments at. So when we talk about meta talk, it's nice to talk about the top tier, and it is interesting, and it's always nice to see what the top of the top is doing. But I really think for us, talking to the majority of the people who are going to watch this, we've always been a channel that's tried to take a 2 and 3 player to a 3 and 2, a 3 and 2 player to a 4 and 1, and maybe that 4 and 1 player to a 5-0. And so I think it's more important that we talk about the mid tables and the meta there and how you beat that, with an eye on the top table, so you can maybe squeak out that one win where perhaps you shouldn't, or it's against a good player. And so I'm just looking for a change of mentality around that, because if you are taking to beat that Marine Dreadnought list, you are not taking strength 6 AP2 damage. Damage 2 weapons, because you are shooting toughness 7, so you're winning on 5s, reduces the damage by 1, so your 2 damage becomes 1 damage. Those weapons are now the most inefficient profile you can take rather than the most efficient. So that's why I didn't do great with that list, because I took it into Salamander's Dreadnoughts. All of a sudden my autocannons AP1 is no save, they just ignore AP1. The 2 damage becomes 1 damage, and like half my firepower of my list is dead. So I was like, oh, this totally beats Drakari. But I had to play 3 rounds against and 2 rounds against Salamanders. It's like, it was the worst list ever. So it's really important to kind of like think in that way, I think. So, multiple damage, like damage 3 is always great. Strength 8 weapons, have enough to deal with those kind of threats. Or have another game plan, be a massive horde or whatever it is. You've got to be thinking that most of your games are going to be playing against those people. Don't just tech for the best, tech for the rest. That's my takeaway from this.
Yeah, I think it's important to say one other thing though. Yes, bring damage. You've got to bring a lot of damage to your list, but you've also got to bring things to actually play the mission.
Yeah.
And it could, because that's what's actually going to win you the game. Because the majority of the time, when like if I'm playing you, I'm not trying to kill you. I'm trying to stop you from scoring. And that's literally my game plan. I'll be throwing units at you because we're very efficient. I could just throw a witch squad, a cavalry squad at you just to stop you from scoring. And it's what you need to like. Like a recent list the other day. Conrad was running, I think it was at like Glasshammer GT when you're on the live stream. He was running the small scout speeders, and they are so cheap, but they're almost like a venom. They can move blocks, they can jump on objectives, they can do engage on all fronts. So when you're building a list, you've really got to think about what secondaries you're taking. Are you building to the last into your list? Are you building retrieve terrorist data? Are you doing engage on all fronts, or maybe you're doing oath of moment? And you've really just got to think about like how are you going to score rather than how am I going to kill my opponent, because you're going to come up against those matchups where you're probably going to have to hide quite a lot because they're just the counter to your list, because you get it, and you have to think about what secondaries to take, what units can I just throw away just to distract whilst I'm getting like a warp ritual off, or all of these things. So it is important to deal damage, but you also got to score the points by list building correctly as well.
Well, if you want an anecdote about that, involving Conrad, funnily enough, I played him at High Wycombe in a tournament. It was just an RTT, and I bought a list there. It wasn't a serious RTT. I was just, they're playing on 6 by 4 foot boards, like it was old school, but with all the new rules. So I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to bring out the Iron Warriors, like all the demon engines. So I had a Lord of Skulls, I had 3 Decimators with Soul Burners, Lord Discordant, just all the demon engines. And it is such a brutal list, man. It's like 30 plus mortal wounds. I've got the Crimson Crown. I've got the Warpsmith giving the reroll 6s. So literally everything is just exploding 6s to hit, exploding 6s to wound, and it's just an insane amount of damage, and it's on big tough bodies. And he's playing Drakari, and he's playing a tech Drakari list, right? And I got first turn, I killed everything that was an anti-tank threat, just picked it up in turn 1. I think he was a bit surprised by how much damage it did, and I just spent 3-4 turns tabling him. But because this list was like a fun, I know I'm not going to take this LGT, this is just an enjoyable list to play. I didn't bother taking any secondaries into it, and I was basically tabling him. I was tabling him, and he was kind of dumps a little bit because he thought it was just a dead game. But he kind of like picked up from the last couple of rounds, started playing for points, and he actually beat me by 1 point. And that was just because I was just looking at my secondaries, going, I have nothing to score in secondaries. I couldn't score Rod. I didn't have enough infantry for it. Like I can't even remember what I took. But honestly, I had none of that built into my list. I just had damage and firepower and survivability. So despite the fact that he was down to a couple of models here, there, like 2 Cablites around the corner there, and 1 witch over there, and all that sort of thing, it didn't matter, man. He was scoring the points. So even a game that he had no rights in winning, from how it started, he managed to pull out a win. And that was just because it wasn't teched into the list. I just did not have secondaries teched into that list. So I really would say that's so important. Okay, well, let's move on to our next section, which is Warp Ritual, and this is tournament prep. So we are in LGT season. We're pretty much a month out, just under a month out now, and we've been playing a few tournaments over the last couple of weeks to try and sort of feel out where the list may be. So what we want to talk about today is we want to talk about a little bit what we do in our sort of mindset for moving forwards to a tournament, particularly a big tournament, how we go about prepping for it, what we're going to try out, and currently, as it is LGT season, what we've experienced. So Dom, you're 3-4 weeks out from LGT. Where are you at?
Gosh, it's first off, I looked at the mission pack and I was like, okay, let's have a look, because they, in the LGT, if you haven't opened the mission packs at all, what they do is they give a description of the terrain that's going to be on the table, and then they show examples of each deployment type for each mission. So
it's a really thorough pack. It really
is very,
good.
very
hats
thorough.
off to how they set that pack up. It is good. It has changed a lot, which maybe isn't so good, but how they deliver it is good.
Yeah. So the first thing I did was I looked at the terrain pack and I was like, okay, so you got some big line of sight blocking terrain with no windows in the middle. Then in each deployment zone, you have 2 you have like 2 small L's with no windows. Then you have 1 like medium shaped L which has windows but it's got the obscuring keyword.
Just to interrupt, if you don't know what an L is, it's sort of a vernacular that we use for the L-shaped terrain. So it's typically runes in a square piece like this. Games Workshop has a piece of their standard terrain that looks like that. I can't see, it's kind of like that. It's L-shape, isn't it? But you've seen a lot of this in typically in the middle of the table. You see two very large L shapes. They block line of sight from two angles. Obviously, you can walk onto them, and typically they're tall enough that they give obscuring as well. But it's very common in 40k now that this is what we're seeing everywhere, particularly in tournaments. I think everyone's just moving to an L shape because it's just necessary to play the game well. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, it's good to say, because the reason why I'm saying like there's no windows on the small shape L's and the big, like in the middle sort of line of sight blocking ones, is because there's no windows. You can have a model literally on the other side of that wall and it cannot be seen, which is huge for like hiding like squads of, I don't know, Hellions, or if you're trying to hide like Be'lakor or anything like that. If you can get him into certain angles where the big L in the middle, which is huge, is huge.
It could actually hide a knight, I think, behind it.
Yeah, you can. You can.
So a lot of vehicles
it's 20 by 20 centimeters. Yeah. So it's a big old box.
Well, here's a quick question, Dom. How do you know that it's 20 by 20 centimeters? What prep have you been doing?
Oh my god! So for our local club, there's a few of us who are going to LGT. So we one of our friends, Steve, has made his own terrain, but because there's a few more than I thought there would be who actually wanted to constantly use them, I've also I built my own terrain using the measurements that they have. And it's for the reason of I want to know what I can almost abuse out of the terrain pack. I want to know what can hide where, and
what can't. It's almost more important to know what can't. Yeah. So what was the first thing you realized when you put your Jakari on the board, eh?
So I'm a Raider Rush guy. So I'm bringing like 6 or 7 Raiders and a Ravager, all this sort of stuff. And there's one thing that annoys me about this the most. You can't see the Raider at all. You can't see the hull of this Raider, but you can see the sail. The sail is huge. It's sticking up out of the terrain, and by the rules, the sail is part of the hull. So even though you can't see the entire Raider, you can see this little like spike at the top. You can still shoot it, which is frustrating, but it's the rules. And what this means is, after I've done all the testing, I've built all the terrain, I've laid all my Raiders out. I can only efficiently hide 3 Raiders out of all of the Raider chassis that I'm wanting to take to LGT.
Now, can we just stop for a minute? Because it's really important. This is the whole point of this section, really, is talk about tournament prep. So there was 2 paths that you could have gone down here, and a 2 and 3 player that is the perennial 2 and 3 and never quite making that 3 and 2. Maybe he's done it once or twice, or a 3 and 2 player that's a perennial 3 and 2, never making that 4 and 1 player. Most of those people will take the list that they've played, that they feel comfortable with, because they've won some games at their club with it, and then they've done reasonably well at a tournament a couple of weeks ago with it, and they're like, I'm feeling this list, I've got it dialed in, I'm going to go to it, and they're going to go to LGT, and they're going to start up, and they're going to look at the board and go, oh geez, I've got 5 Raiders and I can hide 3 of them. If that, they might not even realize they can hide 3 because they haven't actually practiced enough to see how they can fit in and what they could do. And all of a sudden they go first turn against a shooty army, Marine Dreadnought list. I mean, they're expecting to play at some point in that tournament. And it's not even going to be a game. It's just going to be like, oh, pick up 5 of your Raiders turn 1. And now you guys are running across the board. Now they can still play. It's still Jakari. They've still got play into that. But what a massive step down. You've got to build your way back up. You've got to be right in the game. It's very disheartening to lose those many models. It's disheartening to go second, for most people if they're not prepped for it. It's disheartening to lose 4 or 5 models. And then your mindset's just not there. And you think, oh, this is just a lost game. Now, if you had played in your tournament prep that terrain and you'd practice the different boards, and remember there's 5 different terrain setups for each of the boards, you've got to actually play each one of those, then you would have realized, in terrain map 3, 4 and 5 I can't hide more than 2. This list doesn't really work. Maybe I drop down to Venoms, which is exactly what you've done, Dom, isn't it, to make it work. And that comes from the prep. So the biggest piece of advice we have here is get yourself a set of the terrain that you're going to play at. LGT, they sell a pack of the terrain for about 80 quid from TT Combat. It's fantastic terrain. I highly recommend it. But we made it for a couple of quid from some FlexiCard in an afternoon on Sunday. And that's we've had one of those sets for 2 years now, still going, and we built another set. So it's not expensive. and start it a ways out. We've had this tournament pack for like, I don't know, almost 2 months now. So all we've done, we play once every Thursday at the club, and we just try each of the missions. And so by this point, we've played every mission that we're going to play. We've played it once, we've set up on it, and we've realized what works and doesn't work. Now, we probably want to scrim some more before we get to it so we get a bit better. But that is the difference in your preparation between someone who's just going to turn up to the tournament and realize half their army doesn't work because, quite frankly, this bad terrain setup is not very good for Warhammer, considering where it is. I think it's very 2 years ago, and I don't think it's evolved since then when a lot of the other stuff has. A lot of other tournaments have found an evolution to what that works. But it's what you're playing, and it's the biggest tournament, and it's something that you probably want to do the best at. Of all the tournaments you're going to play this year, that's probably the one you want to do best at. So that's it. That's the prep, isn't it? What other things have you been doing with terrain then? We've got a set. It didn't cost us anything. We've started long enough out, so we haven't had to cram a load of games in. We've just played them as we would do normally every week. So we've got loads of practice. What else have you been trying with that terrain? Have you been doing anything else?
Yeah, so with the terrain, I think the most important thing you need to realize is how your army is actually going to move across the board. Because I play a very frail army, and if enough guns are pointed at me, I will just die. And like my witches have a 6-up invuln. Like that's their save until they get in combat, but they get a 4-up invuln. But I want to know how I'm supposed to get from my deployment zone to the midboard. And thankfully, for these big 20 by 20 centimeter like line of sight blocking like buildings in the middle, you can effectively, with Venoms and Talos, you can, and Raiders, if you're still going for Raiders, you can just jump from one terrain to the other and still be quite protected. But the way the kind of terrain maps set out, you always have like a big square L pointed at you and one pointed at your opponent, and you can both abuse that to get closer. Because if it was just a wall and you can't go past it, it's not going to be great tournament terrain design. So it's designed so both of you can move up on every single map and still have some stuff hidden. But yeah, that was the first thing I did after I built it. I was like, right, how can I move across this? And there's certain angles I have to do to get across to be safe, but that's the first thing. And now I've worked out how I'm going to move across. It's what secondaries are good. Am I taking engage? Am I taking rod? Am I taking warp ritual? I can't take warp ritual, but as a chaos player, like, would you take warp ritual in this? And it's also figuring out where the firing lanes are as well, which is
I'm really glad you said that. Yeah. Do you know what? That was the point I wanted to kind of like hang on for a minute. So you've talked about moving, and and like one thing you mentioned to me the other day is, I've just realized that in my deployment zone on, I think it's 3 of the maps, there's an L here and there's an L there, and my Venom can move perfectly between those two. So and there's usually a point. There's usually a point in either of those two, or for most of the maps, or for a lot of the maps anyway. So that if you lose a Venom on this one, that this Venom can make it to that one without having to measure it. So just by the virtue of putting one on either one, that if you lose one, you can move to it next turn. So things like this are really important. These are pre-measuring, lay it all out there. I tell you what a lot of people have a problem with, and I'll be honest, because I was the same. Very unlikely, I'd imagine, that many people listening to this are going to go buy this terrain or build it and then sit down and put it on the board and measure it out. People are just too busy. When they got time to play Warhammer, they want to play Warhammer. But there's nothing stopping you buying or building this terrain, because I think you're going to have to do that, or at least chip in the club or make a piece each or whatever. But you do have to play on it. So when a month out, start playing games on it. Like we were like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, we tried an LGT setup. As soon as they released the first map, we're like, let's just put the train on the board because we own it from last year. Let's just see. And it completely changed how we were playing our list and what we were thinking
completely.
about. So you're measuring around. The point here is that you're going to play the game. You're going to, in playing the game, you're going to try things. Can I move from here to there? And that's going to be logged in your bank, your memory bank. But the other thing to do when you're playing that game is to realize the firing lanes. People talk about this, and it's a little bit of a difficult concept for people to really understand the importance of, because people get it right. There's a firing lane here, a firing lane there. What they don't quite realize is that can shift your entire strategy. We play a game now with Warhammer. When we used to do our D6 videos, like when we started, like however long it was ago, 3 years, 4 years ago, whatever, so much of it was tactics. It was like, okay, in the combat phase you can do this, or in the deep strike phase you can do this, and this is how you get an advantage on your opponent. And a lot of it was jank, quite frankly, but it was what we enjoyed, and it's what we made videos out. And it was great telling people, now you can wrap a rhino, you can hold people in combat, you can do a 0-inch deep strike. But now the game, because they've got rid of so much of that, is way more on the overall strategy, is the macro game. And so this is, okay, I start up in Dawn of War, but do I want to pivot around to a hammer and anvil kind of shape, because that will give me more board presence or better control of those points? And so when you're talking in that kind of 2-3 turns down the line, firing angles are so important. So if you played one of those maps, and I think it's the sweep and clear map or the overrun, I think they're very similar. If you go, well, do you know what? That big L shape on that corner, it literally blocks out a good sort of half the board. And then the other L shape on this corner means the firing angle is kind of down the middle, but then that's shooting mostly over -1 to hit stuff. And certainly anything on that right side is completely out. So in deployment, because we're playing alternate deployment, if you can bait your opponent, so you say you put something big on one side and he starts putting his las cannon chickens on the opposite side to shoot your first knight or whatever, then you start putting a few more things down there. So he starts thinking, okay, well, he's going heavy on this side, I'm going to put more stuff on my side. But then you come to the more important stuff and you ram that all over the other side. And then in particular, if you have any redeploy, or maybe you get the first turn, you move stuff across, you can find that half his army can't shoot, or has to come way out of position to shoot. He's coming off points. He's doing things he didn't want to do. The whole game has been played somewhere else on the map, and he's kind of just stuck out over there. Like, these are really, really valuable stuff. Now, and we're not going into too much detail exactly how you do all these things. All we can say is, in your tournament prep, play the missions in the book that you're actually supposed to play from the pack, play it on the actual terrain. That's the most important thing. And just see how these games go and just log it in your bank. So when you come up to that next game, you're like, oh, do you know what worked really well for me? Or do you know what worked really well against me? I'm going to try it against someone else. These things come from practice. And it's not like I'll go scrim that list 100 times, set up the terrain on your board at home and spend 3 hours measuring every inch. Just get the terrain, play the missions in the book, and try and play that as much as possible as you can before a big tournament. It's as simple as that. Okay, so I think that's mostly it. I think the last thing just to mention from LGT is the fact that it is such a different tournament, because it's a 1,000-person tournament, or how many players? They got 400 people playing the 40K. I think it's something around that. You're not. It's a whole completely different experience how it's set up. You're going to play more in the mid tables than you would do anywhere else, because of the amount of people that are going to be there. Like, the top players will score hundreds and they'll be playing each other pretty quickly, and everyone else is likely to be playing at the lower to mid tables for a lot of it. Even if you go 4-1, you could still just be playing. You could never play any of the top tier lists and still go 4-1, 5-0. So it's really important to just understand that is a different experience for you, and just have fun with it. Just make sure that when you're going out there, you're just looking to enjoy yourself. Have you got any other tips at all, Dom?
Yeah, I would say, especially with this LGT terrain, because there are a lot of brutal firing lanes that armies are just going to abuse with their amount of firepower they can take. Start to think about adding a bit more than normal, like, durability to your list, because you're going to have to try and stick around to score those primary points. So in your list, you just got to think about, one, what's going to hold the points, and for how long can they realistically hold it. Yes, there's some obscuring terrain which you can hide behind, and infantry is very good. But if you have like jetpack infantry, things that can move fast, that can also still hide behind the smaller L's which have no windows. Like, for me, it's like Reavers and Hellions just jump about and do actions and score points and just take people off points. That's kind of my mindset. You also got to think about damage, but it's not the most important thing. It's all about the secondaries and playing the mission. But you've got to have units that are going to stay around to actually be able to score them as well.
Yeah, or double down on points. That's the other thing. You don't have to have a particularly survivable unit, but if you have a squad with another squad and a character, they've got to kill 2 squads and a character. The survivability of that comes from the fact that it's 3 units, which mostly is going to take at least 3 units of shooting to kill. Close combat's a little bit different, but that you could have 2 squads of guardsmen and a commissar, and that's really durable. Even though in the open that would just die in 2 seconds, because they've got to kill those 2 units, then they've got to kill the commissar. If there's one guy left, they can't shoot. A couple of guys left, they can't shoot the commissar. It has its own inbuilt durability. So doubling down on points I think that's maybe that's just a little takeaway to say as a piece of advice. If you've got one unit on a point, you got to expect you're going to lose that unit and you're going to lose that point.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Put 2 units
Yeah.
on a point. That's really it. Okay. Well, I think that's enough for tournament prep. We do want to do a proper LGT special. We may do that a little bit closer. More because I'm quite concerned they might just change all of the rules 2 weeks out. I honestly would not be surprised if we see that. So we don't want to go too heavy into it now. Plus, Dom, you have no idea what you're taking.
Not yet.
Well, I do, and I'll be talking about it in the next section, which is raise the banners. Okay, so Raise the Banners is where we're going to talk about a list we've seen every week, or one we've come up with, or one we think is interesting. As I said, it's about getting the juices flowing. It's about seeing some stuff that isn't just the same meta lists over and over again. Some of it isn't going to be that strong, perhaps, because it's not, the most tuned top tier list, but it's an interesting take on a list or an interesting idea. But we're going to start this week a little bit different. We talked a lot about LGT this week. I feel like I've dialed my list in, Dom. I think I know what I'm playing.
Yeah.
I think it's a list I've played. I've gone back to Chaos. I played Netcons for a good period of time in the darkest days of COVID and 9th edition. But a long time ago, they lost any ability to compete in 9th edition. I thought I'd go back to what is most broken about 8th edition and see if it can still work.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with it. I will start by saying that this list started with 20 Noise Marines in a Charybdis. Coming down turn 1. And it was just hilarious. It's where everybody starts, clearly. It was that Radbeck, so and it's evolved from there. So we'll try. Don, we can pop this up on the video later, I think, but I'll explain that as we go through. So I played this list a lot just before the Thousand Suns came out, and the Thousand Suns has given me some positive changes to it and a little bit of a drawback. So I'll explain the difference there. There's still some fine tuning on this list. I expect it will change a little bit before it, but I think the core components are there, and I'm pretty happy with it, and it's something I'm interested in. So we have 3 sections to this list. We've got 3 detachments because we are going full Chaos Soup right now. We have an Emperor's Children detachment because Emperor's Children are literally the best and they are my favorite. We have a War Dog detachment, or a super heavy Chaos Knights detachment. And we have a Thousand Suns detachment, as I said in the outset there. So we are going to start by listing the random collection of crap that I put into this list, and then I'll give you a bit of explanation about why I feel like it could be good. So we're starting off with starting off with Emperor's Children. Emperor's Children are all about just they're the hammer unit. They're going to come down. They're going to blow a hole in your army. They're going to strike with absolute perfection, and then they are going to die gloriously, exactly as Emperor's Children have to do. So we've got a Chaos Lord with a jump pack, twin lightning claws. He's there for reroll 1s, and he can move 12 inches, so he's pretty much getting where he needs to be. We have a Dark Apostle, surprise, with the Relic Banner, which will give reroll wounds to all of the Emperor's Children, but for this detachment, I'm only using it for the Noise Marines. And then, as you expect, we've got 10 Noise Marines in a Dreadclaw drop pod. And that Noise Marines have 2 Blastmasters and the rest all Sonic Blasters. And then we have a squad of Raptors, and that's the Emperor's Children detachment. Now, all of this is about one thing. It's about the Dreadclaw coming in turn 1, which is the big change, which it can do now. 10 Noise Marines shooting twice with the +1 strength, +1 damage strat, and the +1 to wound strat. 4 CP, turn 1, every game without question. And what that equates to is, let's count it up. So it's, 8, 16, 24. So it's 48 Sonic Blaster shots. So it's 48 strength 5, AP dash but ignores cover, 2 damage, turn 1. Rerolling 1s and +1 to wound. That is a lot. And then the Blastmasters, which are the absolutely just brutal thing about this, are a D3 shots each. So there's 2 of them, but they're shooting twice. So it's 43 shots. Strength 8, AP 2 damage, and ignores cover. Sorry, D3 damage, +1 and ignores cover. Quite complicated there. What it is, in simple terms, is a bucket load of dice.
It is.
Shooting so much 2 damage or multi-damage weapons. It's insane. Just to put it into context, the Blastmasters hit knights on 3s, rerolling 1s, wound knights on 2s, rerolling everything. everybody rerolls everything, and then they're D3+1 damage at AP2. So like that is it's just insane. I mean that them alone will pick up at least a night and a half. Could get lucky and always do 2 nights. So it is so much damage, and I've just found every game that comes in and just takes something off the board. 20 Vanguard guys in a Scutari list with all of the buffs in Lucius still picks up. I don't know. I played Vic just a couple of days ago. I think I still picked up 16. I think it was left 4 with that squad, and that's through the +2 cover. They're getting 2 up saves, but you're shooting 50 odd dice at them. They're going to fail 10 of them, and then those guys are dead. So it is just comes in there, it does the damage. So that is what that does. What's other is really interesting about that is after it's done its damage, it's the target, because it's the most damaging thing on the board. So you're gonna have to shoot it, because otherwise it's going to shoot you back again. And when you shoot it back, they die and they shoot you back again.
Oh, it's so mean. It's so mean. I absolutely love them. There's just, especially as I'm also a Chaos player as well, viewers.
Yeah.
And Noise Marines have always been one of the units I've loved.
Yeah.
Like Lewis is right. This is mean, and this is probably the best combo you can have in Chaos at the moment, like before Codex. And it's a lot of damage, and it's a lot to deal with, considering you can't really do much about it unless you really do get the screen out.
Yeah, well, I'll come on to why you're not getting your screen out in a bit. So that is it. That just comes in, does the damage. I do also like the fact that the Dark Apostle has the 2 apostolites that go with him. So basically, Dark Disciples, I think they're called. They're a separate unit. So they cost 10 points for 2 models that are infantry. So they can raise banners, they can retrieve Octarius data, they can do whatever they want. So it is in fact, do you know what the best thing about this list is? That 10 points, because that gives me retrieve Octarius data and probably an engage for 10 points. And you know what? Are you shooting them realistically? Like, okay, at some point you might throw some damage their way, but when you're looking at the barrel of what this list is in its entirety, they're just going to run around and scoring their objectives and doing what they need to do. I find very often they drop down, they start on the board. The Dark Apostle runs off, does his reroll wounds auras, and then just as a character running about trying to get engaged. They do retrieve Octarius data, jump in the Dreadclaw. The Dreadclaw flies somewhere else on the board. They get out and do it somewhere else, and that's two out of 4 done with a 10-point unit. So just great. Anyway, I could go on and on about it. And then 5 Raptors, and everyone knows what the 5 Raptors are there for. They start in Deep Strike. They don't cost a CP. They come down and they do retrieve Octarius data, or they do engage on all fronts. Holding them to turn 3 is quite useful. I've managed to find 5 points to give them a lightning claw, which actually, it's quite nice, to be fair. So they can honor the prince, which is a stratagem to make an auto charge basically, and they can come in and pick up a little unit on the backfield. So they've got a bit of play. But yeah, exactly. But that's basically it. So that right there, I think right now that is the best. What is it, like 700 points that you can spend on Chaos anywhere? 605 points. Yeah, that is the best 605 points you can spend with the 3-4-year-old book that is the Chaos Space Codex. Right. So then we go into the meat and bones of the list. It's a super heavy Chaos Knights attachment consisting of 5 War Dogs. That's right, 5 War Dogs. House Spectrix, I think it is, which means they can reroll 1 hit and 1 wound. And I'm loading them out pretty much. I'm splitting between Lightning Locks and Volkites. So I've got I've got 2 with 1 of each. I've got 1 with 2 of one and 1 with 2 of the other, and then I've got 2 auto cannons. This is just solid damage throughout the game. It's tough to beat. You can't really focus them when you got the Noise Marines in your face, because the Noise Marines get 2 rounds of fire. They are just going to pick you up. So you kind of got to focus them, and then you got a lot of stuff. So these guys get to play a lot. But what I find is that most of the time they're just going to be sitting on objectives. So like 2 of them on 1 objective, it's 24 wounds of T7 on objective. You're not taking that off. Even if you kill 1, the other one's still going to be there. So that's what I'm saying. I've got 5 of them. I put 2 on 2 objectives. Those 2 objectives are just mine. Like, you can come to close combat and try and do it that way, but you're not shooting me off those objectives. So that works really well. And just last thing to say they're infernal. So you get +1. You can overcharge them to get +1 strength +1 damage on one of the weapons. And it's really interesting because some of these matchups, the Volkite going into strength 7, 3 damage is insane, like against Raiders, for example.
Really good.
Against the Raiders, that's just an amazing profile with mortal wounds on 6s and 5 shots, rerolling a hit and wound. That's great. But other games, maybe the lightning lock, going to strength 7, 2 damage. It's at AP2. That's against like chickens. That's way better because they get -1 damage. Sorry, they're not going to get -1 damage. They got +2 to their save or something like that. So they're getting like 2 up save. So yeah, but coming back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the video, it's strength 6, strength 7. It's strength. This is what's good about it. It's strength 6, 2 damage weapons that can become strength 7, 3 damage weapons when they need to be.
Yeah,
right. So that means
very efficient.
That means if I'm playing the top tier, I'm playing the Sisters, I'm playing Drukhari, I'm playing Admech, I'm strength 6, 2 damage, exactly where I need to be. If I start playing those Space Marine Dreadnoughts, I go to strength 7, 3 damage. That is the ability to switch between those two, and it's just about which weapon do you overcharge. That's all it is. Do I overcharge this one or that one? They've got one of each, and I get the choice. So that was where I come to with that list, and 150 points each.
It's so cheap, especially for the damage, and it's such a durable and reliable chassis as well.
Yeah, 5 up in fun. You can make it a 4 up, rerolling 1 hit, 1 wound. It's just points efficiency. That's where that's coming in the list. And then finally, we're into the Thousand Suns. Now this has changed, but this is I started with this list in a lot of different places. What I knew was important is that if I'm playing the Noise Marines and they are as powerful as they need to be able to land and they need to be able to shoot what they want to shoot. They cannot be forced into a corner because of all the infiltrating in the board right now, because they just will not get the right target. They're a big waste of points that way, and it's just it all goes bad. So I played Nurglings for a while, and I was looking at other infiltrators, and very quickly I found myself playing, just before the Thousand Suns book came out, 20 Rubric Marines with Risen Rubrici in Cult of Duplicity, and I'm playing the same thing, but I've gone down to 10 now because obviously the squad max size is 10. But yeah, you've experienced this, Dom. How does it play into your mandrakes, man?
Yeah, you think a little squad of mandrakes will be okay to kind of screen out a little bit, but it's just the base of the model makes it very hard to kind of deal with, because you can spread them out so far across the board, and even just 10 is enough to make a big landing zone. And the nice trick about your list is that if you do end up going second, you can bring them back, which is nice.
So it's the Warlord trait of Cult of Duplicity. It's the same in the new book as it was in the old book. So you pay. The problem is now they've gone to 2 CP for Risen Rubrici. It used to be 1 CP. So the forward deploy, that's called Risen Rubrici. So it used to be 1 CP, and this is a very CP starved list. It's gone to 2 CP. It's still worth doing in my mind for this list. I think there's a lot. I don't think it's worth in a lot of lists, but I think this list, it needs it. It's the whole point of the list. So you pay 2 CP, you start them 9 inches away, and then if you go second, you can redeploy with the Warlord trait up to D3 units, but you're only looking at 1 anyway, so you're guaranteed to get them. And then you just pop them in your backfield, and just keep that in the pocket, and then they can teleport later in the game because they're Cult of Duplicity, so they can teleport forwards. They used to have the Inferno Combi Botters, and they used to double shoot. They've massively lost that now. They have I've given them the Warp Flamers, which is still like 10 D6 Flamers, but it's range 12, so you can teleport and shoot them. That's still really great. And they've gone to 2 wounds, so they're tougher. Just to give you a feel for it, the 20 man could screen out the entire board in any deployment. Literally, there's nothing you can forward deploy in almost any deployment. I think the only one I struggle. No, I don't think there's any. In fact, even the 9-inch table quarters one, I can pretty much block you off. The 10-man one, you do have a little space, so you tend to end up leaving a little space one side, but I get to dictate that. So I go, you know what, I've deployed most of my army on this side. I'll let you put your 1 squad of infiltrators just on that corner over there, where I don't really care because it's not affecting. So it hasn't really changed much. 32 mil base plus 2 inches apart times 10, and then a 9-inch on one side because you can't be more than 9 inches, so you get that space. That is the board, so you're pretty covered there. If you go first, you still redeploy them, but you jump them all up together and you put them exactly where you need them for a first turn charge, and a Flamo on 10 OBSEC units that are really durable. We're just going to take one of your backfields. So yeah, it's that's a solid part of the list. I like it. So many points, 260 points, but it's good.
It's worth it. It's worth it because it's tough. It'll stick around, and those flamers can pick up a lot of bodies if they need to, and especially with Admech being quite prevalent with the amount of bodies they have on the board, and there's a lot of armies which are going horde as well.
Yeah.
it's a very good sort of counter, because you've like we've been saying in this video already, is that what you're thinking of with this list, you've got the damage output. You've also got for all the like the mid tiers, so the strength 6 and all this sort of thing, which you can up it to strength 7. Then also you've got your flamers to pick up of the top tier list, which are bringing lots of hordes and low, low toughness bodies. And it's good. These are sort of things you need to think about when you're designing a list. You got to think about all the threats.
Yeah, I think my player skills probably going to hold me back a little bit in this tournament, but I think the list has got what it needs to do well. It's quite hard to play, but it's still, I don't know, I'm getting enough reps in it where I think it can do well. It's not got a patch on a top tier AdMech list. Like you're not going to get that out of 8th edition rules. But it's bringing together the best of that with a bit of sprinkling at 9th, and I think it's pretty decent. The one thing I keep toying with is if they've got the Pirate Flux, which gives a +1 strength, so they go to strength 5, these flamers AP2. I've had an Infernal Master in the list. I keep kind of taking him out, putting him back in, because that can make a strength 6, and then you've got that strength 6 profile, which is just amazing into all of your Drakari or AdMech sisters, whatever. And then I'm just playing for points the rest of the list. So I've got a squad of 5 Rubric Marines that are just going to sit on the back point. They can teleport anywhere they need to be. They're going to do my rod. They're going to do my engage. They're just my point scorers along with the Raptors, and that. So if you think the Raptors, the Rubric Marines that can teleport, so Raptors Deep Strike, Rubric Marines teleport, and the 2 Dark Disciples, that's 3 rods that you are not going to stop, and can be anywhere on the board pretty much. So that 4th rod I'm just playing for, and I've got to kind of forward think that. But that's my rod done. That's 12 points in the bag. I should be scoring that pretty much every game. Probably going to play for engage on all fronts, because similarly I'm going to have these big units that are going to be all over the place and a bunch of characters. So just to wrap off this list then, I was thinking about the last secondary, and that's always a hard secondary, right? That you normally can get 2 secondaries solid. Everyone kind of experiences this, but it's worth verbalizing. You've always got like engage on all fronts, domination, or whatever it is. Then you've got your second one, which is you're going to be rod or something similar to that in the shadow operations, raise the banners, maybe something like that. That third one's always a tricky one. It really is, because you're looking at either one of the ones that's subjective to your opponent's army, bring it down, tighten it, assassinate, actually. Or you're looking for something that you can build into your list, but like while we stand, we fight, which is now to the last. A lot of lists can't do that, or you don't want to skew your list too heavily to go into that. So you always struggle. And I've always been kind of floating around the idea of the warp ritual. Obviously, if you're a 9th edition codex, you just get your secondaries, and you just pick one of your 9th edition secondaries, so it's not hard. But for us 8th edition guys, so I've been floating around that, and I've just centered on warp ritual. They changed it recently to allow it so that any character can do it, so you can have a character die. And for a long time, I played this list with enough summoning points for 2 Slaanesh heralds. And basically the idea would be just to I've got loads of characters, lots of Slaanesh characters, obviously. They could just summon a herald onto the middle point. The herald does warp ritual, probably dies because she's out in the middle of nowhere, but who cares? Next turn, summon another one. She probably dies, but I've done it twice, and then I've only got to get it one more time. And probably I've done that one time already at the start of the game when no one was kind of paying attention. So you do it 3 times, you get 12 points. It's not 15, but man, it's a much easier 12. So I've stuck with that. What the new Thousand Suns allowed me to do is I've got a shaman on a disc, and then I've got a exalted sorcerer with the 2 relics that you can give him. One is the roll 3 dice and drop the lowest to charge to cast Temporal Surge, which is warp time. And the other is increase the blessing range of a spell by 2 or by double. So what that means is he's doing a 12-inch warp time. So my shaman can fly out 12 inches, cast warp ritual, and then the exalted sorcerer can pretty much guarantee to bring him back with a warp time safely at a 12-inch range with a 3d6 drop 1 and a reroll if I need it. That he's going out there, popping out, he's coming back. So for me, I've got locked in warp ritual. I've got that for 12 points. I feel I'm pretty confident I'm going to be able to get that. I still have a bunch of other psychic characters if that fails. Anyway, he can run out and warp time himself if he needs to, if the shaman gets caught or something. And I played that terrain enough now to know that there's always a place that I can make that jump from and get back into no line of sight cover. So that's great. And I've got my engage on all fronts, which is probably the hardest one to play for, but I can drop that for the mission one if I need to. And then I've got the rod, and that's building that into my list. That I know I'm taking 2 12-point powers there, so I'm not scoring hundreds, but I'd way rather, particularly a big tournament like this, get a comfortable 12 rather than a tricky 15 that ends up being 9.
Yeah.
You know, and that is just that's my mentality, trying to go from 4-1 to 5-0. I'm not going to win this tournament. I know that. I'm way out of practice. I've got not anything I'll patch on the top players at the moment. So you know, I just go for where I'm going to be, which is if I get a 4-1 and be quite happy, that's where I want to be. If I get 5-0, that would be my goal. So that's what I'm looking for. So yeah, so that's the list in total. What do you got? Any questions? Anything you think is interesting? Last couple of minutes, what do you reckon?
Yeah, so just a few things here which I picked up whilst listening to this is how you building a list. So you're building into secondaries, which you've literally just covered. So you're already, when you're building the list, knowing how you're going to play the majority of the game without the opponent there. Yeah. And then the other thing is that you're building maneuverability. You're building like redundancies into like your Rubikai going halfway up the board. You're building the redundancy in so that your plan for when the drop pull comes down is going to happen, which is huge. Because if you didn't have those rubrics or that ability to do that, then you come up against a really skew list where you've got this guy who's just running loads of commandos and he just goes there, not thinking about your plan, and then you're like, well, I can't come down. And it's really good to see that you're you're planning for absolutely everything. So you're planning for which secondaries you can take. You're opening your list up for all these different things. Your list doesn't have to interact with your opponent to be able to score these points, which is fantastic.
That's why I've chosen them.
Yeah, and it's there. So you've got bodies that can stay on objectives. You've got bodies that can do damage, and then you've also got these knights which can run around the sides. If you need engage, they can get engaged.
They move 12, man. You're getting engaged on all fronts when they move 12. They're the point holders, and they've got engaged. I've also got I've got the old spawn in here and a few other bits and pieces. And what I kind of find is 2 on either point with a bit of trash somewhere around the area to get onto it if I need. And then as the game develops, and first one, I'm doing so much damage, especially if I get first turn, man. It's an absolute first turn wipe you list. Well, put it into perspective. I played the 8th version of this list, which was the double shooting 20-man squad rather than the Warp Flamers. I went into knights and I had bottom of the turn, so I was playing 3 knights and 2, 3, 4 armigers, whatever that list is for Imperium. I had bottom of the turn, so he had first turn. At the start of my second turn, he had 1 war dog and 1 wound, so I had to draw that in one turn.
Oh my god!
But it wasn't even good dice or anything, man. That was just everything was in the open.
It's just sheer volume.
It's just sheer volume. Yeah.
With the Emperor's Children, you got all of these fantastic strats which are very cheap.
Honor the Prince, man. Yeah. If you got a squad that starts, especially get first turn, you got a squad that starts 9 inches away. That's the Warp Flamers. They move 6. They've got a pretty much guaranteed objective charge in their obsec, and then you've got a squad of 10 Noise Marines that can basically guarantee a charge out of deep strike. You can threaten 2 points from turn 1, and if you go second, you still get that kind of play. And so it's really, really great. You know, I think I may have only had 1 or 2 games in maybe the last 15 games of this list where I haven't been able to shoot exactly what I want with the Noise Marines turn 1.
Yeah.
Because I've created that massive landing zone. So yeah, I think it's great. There's a bit more jank in the list. There's a few powers, I've got Perplex in there on the Shaman. So if I don't take Warp Ritual because I'm playing at Sisters, for example, which I'm just not going to take it, I'll take a Mission 1 or something else. Being able to teleport out there and then Perplex something in the backfield, that means that it can't shoot unless it's within 24. You know, I'm not sure if they're taking Exorcist these days, but if they did, something like that, an Exorcist just completely takes out the game. Whirlwind Scorpius, you know, anything that's sitting on the backfield, all of a sudden he flies out to cast the power and then teleports and then gets warp time back. So there's loads of little bits of jank like that in the list and around some of the psychic powers and stuff. But for the most part, that's the list. I think it has everything that I wanted to have in a list to be able to play every type of game. I still think that it's underpowered just by the virtue of the points cost of the units. If I had another 25% points in my army, which I think is the difference between 8th and 9th right now, I think I'd be able to, you know, it would be 2-3 more war dogs, wouldn't it? And this list would just be disgusting. So, you know, that's where I think it struggles, but I think it's making the best of a bad bunch. So I wanted to talk about it because don't be disheveled, man. You know, this is a 3.5-4-year-old codex with knights in it, and it's still able to find something that I think is going to work. And I've done reasonably well with it so far, and I hope we'll do well at the tournament with it. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Dom, any final thoughts about LGT or anything we've discussed today?
Final thoughts. I would just say, when you're looking at your codex and you're choosing the army to bring, just think about how you're going to build your list to score points. You've got to score points. You've got to be able to move around on the board. You can't just sit back and just hope that your guns are going to win you the game. You've got to get used to your army and just get the reps in, the main thing, and build your list for the terrain as well.
If you can't tell me what 3 secondaries you're taking, if you couldn't take the mission one and you didn't, and your opponent was giving you no good options, you haven't got a good list. And those 3 ones, they've got to be getting you 12 points each at least. So yeah, I think my final piece of advice, I really want to hark back to the beginning. Plan your tournament to play against the things that you're going to play against at your tournament, not the things that you hear everyone else is playing. Because like I said, I haven't played Sisters yet in 9th edition. I don't think I've even played one game against them in 9th edition. I've watched a lot of bat raps from them. I've talked to a lot of people who play them well. I've read the codex. I know a lot about them, but I haven't had a game against them because no one I know has played them, and I just happened to have missed them at tournaments so far. So me taking my list to beat Sisters just seems silly. Now maybe I'll pay LGT and lose against Sisters. That's probably what's going to happen now. But it's way better. Even if you're a top tier player, you're playing 3 or 4 games against, Deathwing, Death Guard, Space Marines, Harlequins, Eldar, Tyranids. This is what people play at tournaments. If you're a top tier player, you can probably get through on your skill set. But if you're not, you've got to have a list that's at least going to give you a puncher's chance in hell at taking those lists down. So focus on focus on the majority of the games you're going to play at a tournament rather than the one game you think you're going to play and never do. That's my advice. Wow. I thought that was a good session, Dom. What do you reckon?
I did too. I thought that was great.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll leave it there, guys. And I don't know when we'll be back. There's no fixed and firm plan for this, but we'll hopefully get another session in before LGT for the next Let's Talk Warhammer. Bye, guys.